everyone. So today I want to share with you the books that I have read in the first half of September. It is like super hot out today, and so my kids are doing the pool. I don't think that I've ever had the pool out in the backyard halfway through September, but it's like in the upper 80s. And so yes, so you'll hear splashing and possibly children screaming and stuff like that. So they're in the pool. But I had several books that I read in the first half of the month, and I wanted to talk about them. In the month of September, I'm participating in a few different readathons, so like Series September, and then I'm doing the Fall Into Reading Challenge and the 30 books in 30 days, though I'm doing that with short stories and plays. So if any of these fit with those, I will let you know. I'm only counting things from my Fall Into Reading Challenge that are books that I own and books I haven't read before. So some of these will not count towards Fall Into Reading because I really want to like challenge myself to use that board to just read off of my shelf. So that's why some of these don't go with the Fall Into Reading Challenge. So I'll let you know what they apply to, but I will go in the order. I like doing it from the one I like the best, the one I like the least, because that way I don't get all grouchy with my least favorite books and then have to like get ungrouchy throughout the video. So let's start off with my 5-star reads. So the first one was a reread. I read The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson, and this is the first book in the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. And this book, I had read it, I think, almost 2 years ago, and then I just forgot. I did continue. I started the second book, but only read like the first like 50 pages and then put it down. So I wanted to get back into this world, and so I decided to just listen to this one on audiobook to kind of refresh my memory. And I enjoyed this just as much as I did the first time. The first time I read this, I gave it 5 stars, and I'm going to stand behind that rating because I really enjoyed reading this book or listening to it. Like, I just felt completely absorbed into the characters and what was happening. So it was definitely a good reread. So this is following a girl named Leah, who is a princess who is supposed to be getting married to this prince from another country, and it's gonna kind of form an alliance between their two countries. But she's never met this prince. She assumes he's this old stuffy guy that she just has no interest to being, you know, arranged marriage with. And so she runs away on the day of her wedding, and she decides she's gonna live out her life in a little town and not let anybody know who she is, and just like live an average life of, you know, a peasant or whatever. And then we have 2 men that are introduced. That one is an assassin that was sent to kill her from another country, and the other one is the prince that she jilted. And we don't know for most of the book who's who, so they're just, when we hear from their perspectives, we just hear them as the prince or the assassins. We don't know for most of the book. Obviously I knew going in who was who, but I think that even knowing going in, I thought it was clever the way she introduced them and the way she didn't really give away a lot of clues in the first half of like who was who, or she gave away clues but like also misdirections as well. So I thought it was really well done. I also really just love the female friendships and characters in this, because she runs off with her maid, who is just her best friend. And, you know, when they're living off on the town by themselves, there is no like, you know, princess maid relationship. They're just best friends that are living together and working together. I love their relationship. There's also another woman who works at the tavern they work at that I really enjoy their relationship. And then the older woman who owns the tavern. All of the female relationships are just really beautiful, and I like it when a book focuses on female friendships, you know, in addition to the romance. So yes, still really love this one. And now I've already downloaded the audiobook because I don't want to be like last time and, you know, wait so long before reading the next one. So I plan on picking the next one up later this month. So this one will count to our series September. I don't know if I'm going to count this book or I'm going to wait and count the second book towards series September, so that I can kind of go along with that challenge of not including rereads. So I probably won't count this one into my series September yet. And then the other 5-star book that I read was The Valley of Fear by Arthur Conan Doyle, which is I think the last like novella in the series, because the only books after this are short story collections. So yeah, this is the last novella. This one has both The Hound of Baskerville and The Valley of Fear, so it's actually half the size. And this story is set up very similarly to the first story in the series, A Study in Scarlet. So if you didn't like that setup of where basically we're following along one mystery and then halfway through we kind of like go back in time and hear about everything that leads up to it. And so if you're not a fan of that setup of like kind of that interruption in narrative style, then you probably won't like this one. I didn't mind it. I gave Study in Scarlet 5 stars, and I gave this one 5 stars as well. So I don't mind that narrative choice because I got absorbed right into the past story just as much as I did in the current story. So in the current story, because I don't want to give away what the past one would be because that would give away the solution to the crime. But basically at the beginning of this, Sherlock is sent this kind of mysterious note that he has to decode that warns that something's going to happen to someone. And then a police officer or inspector, whatever, meets up with him and is like, how did you know that that was going to happen? That man is dead. And so he gets, you know, swept into what happened to this man. Is it a suicide? Is it a murder? You know, because mysterious things happen that make a thing that is going to be really hard for it to be a person to have murdered him and all that stuff. So, and I really enjoyed the part with Sherlock solving the mystery, and I really enjoyed the part of going into the past and finding out what led up to the crime. So I liked both parts of it. I really enjoyed this. Probably one of my top ones in the series. I personally really enjoy the novellas almost better than the short stories. I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion. A lot of people really like the short story collections, but I'm reading like the next short story collection, this one, and I'm just not pulled in as much as I was with this one. So yeah, I really enjoy the novellas in the series. So this one was a 5-star for me. And I'm actually going to count this one for series September for, I think it was for the one that had more than 5 books in the series, because this has more than 5 books in the series. If you count all the short story collections and everything. And I'm also counting this for the Fall Into Reading Challenge as a mystery. And then next, let's talk about my 4-star reads. So I have Rumaysa by Radiya Hafıza. And this is a collection of 3 fairy tale retellings, but that they intertwine. So the first characters in the, like the characters in the first story carry on into the next 2. So they're not like separate fairy tales. And I really enjoy the way she did this. They are all with Muslim characters. So our first story is Rumaysa, which is a retelling of Rapunzel, and Rumaysa wears a hijab. So like, I just really love the representation, and I just really enjoy how she took these stories that we've heard all growing up and, you know, changed them into something a little more diverse. And I really enjoy that. I also love the like female empowerment in these stories. We have Rumaysa is the Rapunzel retelling. The second one is a Cinderella retelling, and the third one is Sleeping Beauty. And in all 3 of them, it is the females, the girls, that are the ones really driving the story and really like being the heroes or heroines in their own stories. And I really enjoy that. There's not like a, you know, marriage to a prince in sight in these. So if you are tired of reading to your kids stories where it always ends in a royal wedding, then I think you should pick this one up, because I'm really tired of that. Because, you know, I'm reading my fairy tales to my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old. I don't want them all to end in marriage, because they're nowhere near that. And what, you know, it doesn't feel like a way to empower girls through fairy tales. So this one, what I really love about it, and which some people might not love, I've seen mixed reviews about it, because I think a lot of people go into this thinking it is like for older kids, like maybe like a middle grade age, 8 to 12. But I actually feel like this is even younger. Like this is something I'm going to read to my 3-year-old and 6-year-old. Like this is written on a very young level, and not necessarily that a 6-year-old could read it if they can't fully read, but like it's got full page pictures in a lot of places, a lot of pictures, and also has no content that a lot of fairy tales have that would be inappropriate for a young child, like under the age of 8. So I will definitely be reading this with my kids, because we are reading through some different Grimm's fairy tales. I'm reading like ones that are made for children, but they still all end with, you know, there's, you know, the prince comes in and saves the day, and they go off and get married. And so even though they aren't like the really scary Grimm's versions, they're just not what I want my kids all being focused on. So after we read some of the ones written the way they were written by, like, you know, some of the original fairy tale writers, I'm going to go back and read them this one, so they can see, you know, that the same stories can be just as exciting and adventurous and fun, but with the girls being the heroines. So yeah, I really love this. I only gave it 4 stars because there were some points where the dialogue felt a little too modern. Like it just felt a little off because we're in this like fairy tale world, and then there was very modern dialogue and words used, and so it pulled me out a little bit. But I will definitely be looking to see what this author does in the future. If she does more fairy tale retellings, I will definitely pick them up and read them to my kids, because this one was so excellent. I would highly recommend it if you enjoy fairy tales, and especially if you have young kids that you would like to read a more empowered fairy tale too. And I used this for the Fall Into Reading Challenge for the prompt leaves on the cover, because there's these reflective foil leaves at the top, which are really beautiful. And then now, kind of sticking with the theme of like fairy tales, myths, stories that have lasted over time, I wanted to share with you my favorite picture book that we have read so far in school. We are studying ancient civilizations, and this was when we were studying Mesopotamia, specifically Sumer. So we read Lugalbanda, the boy who got caught up in a war, and this is an epic tale from ancient Iraq, told by Kathy Henderson, illustrated by Jane Ray. And this book was so good, I wanted to share it because I think even as an adult, you can really enjoy it, especially if you enjoy reading myths and legends and things like that. And it was, the pictures were just beautiful. Let me see if I can find some gorgeous pictures. And it is written like a chapter book kind of, but we read this in 2 sittings, me and my 6-year-old. So it's not a hard read or anything. Gorgeous pictures. And the story was so much fun to read. And I was reading the author's notes and things like that, and it turns out that this story was one of, like, when they found this, when they were like, you know, doing excavations in Iraq, they found that this is probably dated as being the oldest story that was written down. So it was like written on the cuneiform tablets, the clay tablets, and that they think that this story is even older than the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is one of the oldest stories of written down in civilization. So this is even older than that. And this one was just so good. It's about this boy, Lugalbanda, who has a bunch of brothers, and he follows his brothers into war, even though he's too young, and he gets sick along the way as they're going to another town to try to like conquer that town. So his brothers kind of like set him up in this cave, hoping that he'll survive until they come back from war. And Lugalbanda is visited by some of the different gods and things like that. And I won't tell any more than that, but it is just, it's, you know, an adventure story, a journey story. And I just thought that the pictures were beautiful. It was super interesting. Like, as an adult, I was just completely sucked into the story. And when my daughter asked to keep going, I'm like, yeah, let's keep going and let's finish this. Because we were going to spread this out over 3 days, since it is like fairly long for like a kid to sit down. I mean, it's like 73 pages. And there is quite a lot of writing on a page. You'll see, like, it is long for a picture book, but we read it in 2 sittings because I just couldn't stop. Neither of us wanted to stop. So if you want a myth to read, I would highly recommend this version of Lugalbanda to read. It's very good. And the next 4-star book I read was The Queen of Attolia by Megan Wallen Turner. And I read this because I had read The Thief, which is the first book in this series, a few years ago, and I didn't like it very much, but I thought, well, maybe it's one I want to revisit or continue in the story, because I heard the series was really good and that it definitely ups the stakes after the first book. Well, I reread The Thief a couple months ago and enjoyed it a lot more, because it really interweaves like myths and stories into the whole narrative. And now that I've been reading a lot of myths lately for school, I was really enjoying that. And so I was excited to pick up this like first like really long novel in the series. Like The Thief is kind of short and written more on a younger level, where this is definitely more written on a older. I think it still counts as a young adult technically from the publishers, but yeah, it's written on an older level and it has more of a story to it. And I still love the way myths are kind of interwoven here, and the gods and things of this world. I don't even know how to describe this, because I don't want to give anything away from the first book, so I won't even like mention characters, but there's basically like 3 different countries that are all kind of at war with each other, or like in struggles over who is going to be in charge of what areas and trade and regions and things. So this is very much a political fantasy, which normally I don't enjoy, you know, wars and things like that. But there isn't like battle scenes. So that's why I don't mind it here. It's more like from the like queens that are in charge, because 2 of the countries are run by queens and 1 is a king. So it's really, and we're mostly focused on the queens and their perspectives. We only get a little of the king. So these queens, you know, we're following them and their like, you know, political machinations and the things that they're doing with their councils and the people around them. So that's more of it than the actual battle scenes or anything like that. We only have very minimal what's happening in any battles. We're more focused on the politics behind the battles and behind the wars, and just really focused on the characters of these leaders and the people around them. And that's what I really enjoy about it, is that, you know, we're following people from 3 different kingdoms, and you would think we would have one that we just, you know, are rooting for the most. And there is one that you are rooting for, but at the same time, I can understand what all the other leaders and all the other people are coming from. And so they feel more complex than just like that this is like the villain that we're trying to beat, this like, you know, bad leader of this country. We're trying to beat them down. That they each have definitely full characters and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And so I think the character work in this is really great. I didn't give it 5 stars just because the problem I have with this is the transitions. Sometimes the like, we would be following people from each of the different countries, and so like as we're going through that, we would be changing from one to the other, and sometimes I would miss that transition. And since it's told in like 3rd person, I think it's told in 3rd person the whole time, and because of that, and because the queens aren't always named by name, they are just you know called queen. Sometimes I would, and you know, sometimes they're called by their name, but then every once in a while, you know, people are just talking to the queen, and I'm like, which queen? I missed the transition, and so that was my only problem, that sometimes I would get a little lost and have to kind of like read ahead, see where the name was, and then go back and like figure out where we were. So that was my only little problem I had with this, was that I felt like the transitions were tough. I almost would like headers or make sure to use the queen's names right away so we know which queen we're following. So every once in a while I got a little confusing like that. And there's just other characters we're following this in this as well that I just love their arcs and things like that. Just everybody is just so well done in this book that it didn't really matter to me that it was a political fantasy, even though that's not really my favorite. And if you're somebody that doesn't like a lot of romance, this one barely has romance in it. Like there's just a little tinge of it, but like hardly at all. Nothing like, you know, Kiss of Deception, where it is definitely forefront is the romance. This one, it's definitely on the back burner. And so I used this for series September. I think I used this as the 2nd book in a series, is the prompt that was to read a 2nd book in a series. So that's what this was. And then for my Fall Into Reading challenge, I used this for a sequel. So next I want to talk about 2 books together because they are in a series and they are rereads, like childhood rereads. And so I didn't actually rate them on Goodreads, but in terms of my enjoyment, I'm filling them in somewhere between the 3 and 4 stars. Because it's hard for me to review these in terms of ratings because they're just so nostalgic to me that I love them, but I can tell as like an adult rereading them that if you were to pick them up right now, they probably wouldn't be like 4 or 5 star books, but the fact that I have all the nostalgia, it lends to that. So I picked up Kill the Story and Play Dead, which are the first 2 books in the Heart and Soul series by Jahnna and Malcolm. And Jahnna and Malcolm were actually a husband and wife duo that wrote together back in like the 80s and 90s. And this is an 8-book series, and I read it back in like high school and loved it. And so a little while ago, I decided I wanted to reread the series. So I went on eBay and tried to find all of them for cheap because they only come in these little mass market paperback versions. And they're really hard to find. Like I actually still haven't been able to find the 8th one. I've looked like everywhere. I can't find it anywhere used. Like I have looked on every single used bookstore website. I've just like Googled for shopping and I cannot find a copy of these anywhere. And they also like are not at my library or an ebook version or anything. So I might never be able to finish the series, but I have the first 7 books of the series. I'm just rereading them for nostalgia. And basically, if you are interested in a super 80s read and can get a hold of them, they are fun. I do enjoy them. I just don't know that they're that high quality because they were written in the 80s and like there are some things like it's definitely like an all-white cast and yeah, things like that, that just is not much diversity. And there's also, you know, just kind of definitely gender roles and things like that. But basically it's about this high school girl who is a journalist, and she starts receiving death threats in this like first one because she's doing a big story at her school and somebody wants to kill the story. And so she, you know, ends up meeting this boy named Mick who helps her solve the mystery, and then they, throughout the whole series, end up solving these mysteries together. And it's called Heart and Soul because she's Amanda Hart and he is Mick Soul. Like, their last names are Heart and Soul. But these were a lot of fun. This first book, I just really love it. I do love the mystery, and I thought it was really good. We're following, like, you know, trying to figure out who wants to kill this story about sororities on their campus, and there's a lot of red herrings. There's a lot of different like people that could be suspects. I think it's a lot of fun. The second one is taking place in a play, like on a professional play in one of their theaters in their community. One of their friends is in the play, and some weird things start happening on the set, and you know, somebody gets death threats and stuff like that. So Amanda decides to become one of the like bit parts in the play so that she can solve the mystery. This one was not as interesting. I just thought that the characters in the mystery just weren't as good, but I did really love this first one, and the nostalgia factor was really high. So now on to my 3-star book, and this one was for school. I read The Golden Bowl by Marjorie Cowley, and we are reading, like the same way with Lugalbanda, we are reading this as part of our Mesopotamia study. And this is about, this is a historical fiction about these 2 siblings, so a brother and sister who are living in the farmlands of Mesopotamia, and it's during a drought, so things are not going very well. So their father got the son set up with an apprenticeship in the city where he's going to be working for a goldsmith, and he says, take your sister with you and try to find her some kind of work. So they are on their own, and they're traveling to the city, and some things happen along the way. As they're traveling, they get the sister into trouble, and then when they get to the city, we follow the brother kind of learning his apprenticeship and trying to figure out what to do about his sister and the trouble she's gotten into and things like that. And the Golden Bowl is just because the goldsmith that he works for is creating this like instrument that has this golden bowl on it for the temple. And this was a hard one to rate for me because I think in terms of for like a book to read with my kid for homeschool, like this is definitely written on like a kid level. It's really big writing. It's definitely fine for this age group. You know, like for a first grade curriculum, it was really a great story for her to understand what life was like back then. And, you know, like the kids have to work just like adults did back then and be a part of society and things like that. And that there were bad things like droughts. And there is like there's a lot of mention of slavery in this and stuff. So just keep that in mind if you're reading it with your kid. So we've had to have that discussion that was very common at this time. And just like, you know, talk about temple gods and temple priestesses and things like that. There's all the stuff from that time period. So I thought it was really great in terms of like linking this with like the encyclopedias and things that we are reading and all the information she was gathering. Like this was like a fiction book following these kids where we could kind of like see the parallels between what we are reading in the nonfiction books with this like fictional story she could get into. So the value of this was really high for homeschool. But in terms of me reading it and me getting pleasure out of it, I found it pretty boring. Like just the way it was written, like the dialogue was very stilted and it just wasn't that like interesting of a plot. So yes, I get the value of this story. And if you really just want to know more about what life was like in ancient Mesopotamia, then I would like say that this is a good one to read to learn about that stuff if you don't want to like read a dry textbook, but it still wasn't that interesting. So 3 stars. I get the value of it, but I wouldn't like highly recommend it for just anybody to read for pleasure. All right, and now we're going to end this video off with my least favorite. It was a 2-star book, and that was For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. And this is a new thriller that just came out. I think it just came out over the summer. And I was really highly anticipating this one because I've read her other 2 books and I found them really entertaining. So the thing with her books for me is that they've never been like perfect thrillers or anything, like not my like favorites, but I've always been highly entertained by her books. You're always following characters who are not likable. Like, if you do not like likable characters, do not read Samantha Downing, because none of her characters are likable, but they're just fun because they're ridiculous in the things they do, and like kind of over the top, and just like twists and turns, and just high entertainment is like what I look to Samantha Downing's books for. So that's what I was expecting from this one. And this one is about a private school where we're, like, the main person we're following is this teacher named Teddy, who, definitely has his favorite students and his least favorite students. He doesn't like the students that have like a lot of money and things like that and feel entitled. And so he kind of wants to stick it to the entitled students. And we're also seeing like a lot of the other teachers, and we're following students and all kinds of different people from this private school. Yeah, none of them are likable characters because we are following some entitled kids, and we're following some really snarky kids, and we're following a teacher that is like, the perfect teacher that everyone loves, but she's just kind of, annoying to follow and stuff like that, and always about her and her accomplishments. And then, there's Teddy, who is definitely like messed up teacher. So like none of them are good people, and so I was looking forward to this. I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. And some stuff starts to happen at the school, and they're wondering who's, like, what's happening. Like, maybe they're just, all accidents, things happening, but then they're starting to think something is going on. Somebody is after people at the school. And yeah, there's not really twists in this one. Pretty quick who it is that's doing it. And that wasn't necessarily a problem with me, but I just found it boring. Maybe if there had been more twists, maybe if the people had been a little more interesting, but even though they're not likable characters, they weren't like as, juicy and interesting to follow. Like, I was like, oh, your guys are just boring. Like, it's not that I don't like you. Like, that's fine if I don't like you, but at least be interesting. I did not find any of the characters in this or their motivations interesting. I sped up the audio because I was gonna give up on this one, and I probably should have, but I was like doing it while I was doing a puzzle, so I was like, whatever, it's in the back. I'll just turn up the speed, and I'll just have it in the background. And so I got through it, but I did not enjoy myself at all. And that's what I'm looking forward to with her books, is entertainment. I didn't find it entertaining. I think I'm the odd man out, though, because I watched, like, the day after I read this book, I ended up watching the, like, live show that Books and Lala did for her Literary Dead Book Club. And everybody on there gave it 4 and 5 stars. And they were talking about all these things, and I'm like, did we read different books? Because I was like, how did you find these characters interesting? So, like, sorry if you were one of those people that love this book. I just didn't get it. Like, I found it incredibly boring. I didn't find any of the characters interesting. I didn't find the plot interesting at all. I really hated how she put in COVID into it, but only for like 2 seconds. So, I'm kind of the opinion, if you're going to write a book that's taking place in 2020, 2021 or whatever, and you either need to go all in and like talk about the fact that there's COVID and that people are wearing masks or social distancing or whatever, all of the like stuff that's going on, or you just need to pretend we're in a different reality and not put it in at all. Where this one was towing the line, like, she obviously wanted to place it in the current time. So there's like 2 or 3 times when they just like mention COVID, but they never talk about masks. They never talk about social distancing or anybody getting sick from COVID or like having to quarantine because somebody else has COVID. There's no other mention of like the ramifications of it on their lives, especially in a school but they just like mention, oh, that person's sick. Do they have COVID? And that's like it. That's like the only mention of it. And so that bugged me. But I'm also like, seem to be off on everybody else's opinions about thrillers this year, because I hated this one and I've seen a lot of people really love it. And then I can't say I really enjoyed, but I enjoyed Survive the Night by Riley Sager and Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Like, they weren't new favorites or anything, but I found them entertaining, and everybody seems to hate those too. So probably don't take my word on thrillers this year, but I hated this book. But anyways, that's all the things that I have been reading this month so far. What have you been reading? Have you been participating in Series September or the Fall into Reading Challenge or the 30 Books in 30 Days, any of those readathons that are happening? Or if you've read any of these and want to talk about them down below, I always love to hear from you, and I will see you next time. Bye.